This last design is my favourite fairy design. It can be painted as just one side or both sides depending on the time you have. I'll be starting with a sponged background on the forehead, but I'm trying to create a little bit of flow for this design. So the rest of this design will follow the flow. I'll start by establishing the line that I'm trying to create by just using the tip of my sponge to map out this flow shape. And today I'll be using Dollhouse from my new collection. It's important that I get this shape right, as the rest of the design will follow this shape, so I'll be taking my time with this step. Once I've established the line, I sponge underneath the shape to create our background. This is an asymmetrical design that I've created today, and there are a few principles to follow when creating a design like this. It's important to keep the balance of an asymmetrical design. So whatever colours you use on one side, you pull those colours over to the other side. This helps to create balance in your design. Also, the size and shape of these elements are important for an asymmetrical design. I've written a detailed explanation on the other important principles of asymmetrical designs in the handout today. I've sponged out the colour, but now I'm just trying to blur the line between the colours a little bit more. So I lift the sponge up a tiny bit higher just to blur that line. We'll use the same colour for the eyes. Sometimes it's hard to get to the inner corner of the eye neatly, so I brush the sponge gently. I'm keeping the eye colour softer so that it doesn't overwhelm the design. Another good tip that I'm using here when sponging the eyes is to press on the brow bone with the sponge first before pressing on the mobile lid. It's more comfortable for kids, as pressing the sponge on their mobile lid is a little bit uncomfortable. While the background is still wet, I'm using my puffer bottle of glitter. I may have been a little heavy-handed with this, but I just love glitter. With my stencil from DIY, I have taped over the fairy wings so that I can add my own. I'm just using the tag regular dark blue for this, using a patting and rubbing motion. This fairy is sitting on the eyebrow. You'll see I'm not sponging where her skirt is. We'll be adding in our own petal skirt. This fairy is my main focal point in this design, and on the other side we'll be adding a supporting focal point. We're moving on to the fairy wings, and to create the delicate shape I'll be using my 5/8 Sedona with the long bristles, and I'll be using my bluebell from Amy Grigg. So the wings of the fairy go in the same direction that you would do a butterfly, so on a 45-degree angle. We want the wings to finish just on the fairy's back. The second wing I'm doing here is the top wing, and it sits just behind the other wing, so we only need to see a little bit of this wing. The technique that I use for the wings is the same technique that I use when I'm doing my flower petals. So I'm wiggling the brush slowly down on an angle, and I'm lifting the brush each time just to make sure that the shape is how I want it. Each stroke making sure that the heel of the brush is still pointing towards the middle of the fairy's back. My aim is to make the wings quite elaborate. The tail of the wings continue to fall down around the face. This wing curving around the outer corner of the eye and sitting on the eyebrow. The bottom tail wings are sitting just on the cheekbone. I'll come all the way over to the middle of the eye, and you can see here as I'm doing the strokes that this shape matches up with the opposite side of the sponged background, creating a nice flow to the design so far. As I let the wings dry, I'll be moving over to our supporting focal point in this design, which is the same colour blue as the fairy wings. This element is a little bit smaller, that's why it's called our supporting focal point. With this flower, I'm doing 3 petals and I'm curving around the shape of the outside of the eye. I'll be letting this dry before I add in the second layer of petals to this flower. While the flower dries, I can fill in the rest of the fairy wings. The inner shape should follow the same shape as the outer wings. Again, I'm wiggling the brush gently and going slowly so I can make sure that the inner layer is the same shape as the outer layer. And now we can come back to the flower and fill in the second layer of petals. If you don't have the convenience of allowing one side to dry, I would always just sponge the area that I will be going over just to make sure that it's dry enough to finish. This next petal skirt is my absolute favourite part of this design. I've loaded up my Blazing Brush Flat number 6 Flora, and on there I have my white, I have Electric by Chameleon and the regular dark blue for the double dip petal. This is another great way that I can bring that balance over to the other side. So by using the same petal colours for the dress, I'm now bringing them over to the flower side to add in some petal detail. I'm following the line of the cheekbone and pointing the petals toward the inner corner of the eye. With the top petals, I'm following the line of the eyebrow. I often do around 5 petals here, and they gradually get smaller as they come towards the focal point. I've now loaded up my half brush again with my custom green for the leaf. This is where I can start to bring in a little bit more direction and flow with the leaves here. Again, I always point the first leaf down towards the direction of the flow I'm trying to create. The second leaf will follow the flow of the sponged background. There's a space between the eyebrow and the wings here. So to give the effect that she's sitting on leaves, I'll be adding in a third leaf just here. Again, keeping the balance and the flow of the design, I'll be bringing the leaves over to the other side as well. Because my triple dip flowers haven't hugged around the eye as much as I liked, I'll be adding in the leaves to create more of that shape that I'm looking for around the eye. You can see here that I'm adding leaves pointing in slightly different directions. This creates a little bit more movement in the design. And once I've finished the leaves, the vines that I add in afterwards create more direction and more flow for the design. For a detailed look and a step-by-step video of how I paint the leaves to face in different directions, just head back to the end of my butterfly design and I'll be showing you how I create those leaves. I'm adding in the vine detail here. Again, as I said before, this just helps to create more flow and direction to the design. As you can see, this is only a very subtle detail in this design, as if I were to do too many, it would make it quite messy because there's already quite a lot going on here. Adding some last vines on the bottom, again following the flow towards the inner corner of the eye and towards the leaves on the other side. I like to soften up the tails of the wing a little bit more by just adding in a little bit of line work. And here my aim is to follow the same shape as the sponged background on the other side. So I'm just curving my brush around and softly flicking up at the end. I'll add one more line in here just to soften even a little bit more, and I'll add one more curl in. I'm using here my number 2 King Art round. I use it for all of my line work. There is quite a bit going on in this design, quite a lot of brush changing, but I just really love this design, and obviously you can choose how much you want to do and how much you want to leave. I love this star detail. Here I'm using my number 2 round global brush, and I'm following the line of the sponged background. I started with just a single layer of stars, and then I can fill in the gaps just to make sure I have the correct shape. There are a few more spaces where I can add in some more dots. I'll add in 5 or 6 small dots in the middle of my flowers, and I'll add a few more dots into my triple dip flowers. And to even up on the other side, I'll be adding in 5 or 6 more dots between the eye and the wing. It would seem that I love dots. As I'm still going, I'm adding in some more at the bottom to draw the focus to the focal point at the bottom. I'll be doing some at the top. And then to finish on the opposite side at the end of the leaves. I almost forgot the most important part. This is the star that the fairy is holding. I have swapped to my script liner, which I do use for all of my stars. But for ease and practicality, you could easily use the same brush you do for the star dots. I hope you love this design today.
All right.